And just like that, one of the brightest stars in comics went dark. Wally Wood wasn't just another Golden Age comic book artist. He was the first superstar artist. Before him, there were people like Will Eisner, C.C. Beck, and Bob Kane. But the fandom and reverence for Wally Wood went to another level. At the offices of EC Comics, fan letters poured in addressed to Wally Wood. At this time, this was a novelty. Usually fan mail was addressed to the editorial letter pages, and sometimes letters were even sent to the fictional characters. In the early 1950s, the only feedback writers and artists usually received was from their editors. Sure, the creators working in daily comic strips got fan mail. Someone like Milton Caniff was a rock star getting shoe endorsements and the cover of Time magazine. But the artists working in comic books for the most part did so in obscurity. This changed with Wally Wood and EC Comics. Entertaining Comics, or EC as they were known, was a small publisher that exploded onto the comic scene in 1950. They began printing horror and science fiction books. These comics had a level of literacy and artistic sophistication that allowed them to stand out from everything else on the comic racks. EC science fiction books struggled when compared to the rest of their line. EC published 3 very popular horror titles, and Mad Comics had become a national phenomenon. The science fiction books didn't have the sales of those other titles, but even back then, science fiction readers were fanatics. They took note that the name Wood was etched on the opening pages of these amazing stories, and inspired readers began sending in fan mail. Not bad for an artist who dropped out of 3 separate art schools. Wood left these schools of his own accord. His talent was never in question, but Wood was a rebel. He was easily bored. Wood also suffered from horrible migraine headaches. These headaches often caused him to lose focus and made formal education difficult. While in and out of art school, Wood tried to break into comics. More often than not, he found himself waiting in some publisher's lobby for long periods of time. While waiting in these lobbies, he began networking with many other young hopefuls trying to break into comics. He got tipped off that Will Eisner was looking for a background artist on the Sunday Spirit sections. Wood showed Eisner some samples of his work and was hired on the spot. Eisner was a huge influence on Wood. Eisner took a cinematic approach to comic book storytelling. He used the very same techniques that a film director would: close-ups, wide shots, bird's eye view, and so on. At the Eisner studio, Wood would learn from some of the best in the industry. In addition to Eisner, he worked closely with future Pulitzer Prize-winning political cartoonist Jules Feiffer. A second big break happened shortly after. Wood was hired as an assistant by George Wonder. Wonder had replaced Milton Caniff on the Terry and the Pirates newspaper strip. To maintain the popularity of Terry and the Pirates, Wonder imitated the style that Caniff had pioneered. That style was later known as the New York Slick style of cartooning. The New York Slick style focused heavily on realistic proportions. It required very strong technical drafting lines, proper background perspectives, and an absolute attention to detail. Combining the New York Slick style he learned from Wonder with the cinematic storytelling approach of Eisner, Wood became a fan favorite at EC. In addition to the fans, Wood became most admired among his peers in the comic book industry. As an illustrator for Mad magazine, he was named Comic Book Artist of the Year by the National Cartoonist Society in 1957 and 1958. Things were going great professionally, but Wood's headaches began getting worse. He began drinking to dull the pain. Flash forward to 1964. Mad magazine had made Wood the highest paid artist in comics with a $200 page rate. Things changed for Wood when he turned in a page with an abundance of liquid paper on it from corrections. This wasn't normal for Wood to turn in a page like this, and as a joke, Mad magazine editors rejected it. It was the first time one of his pages had been rejected since his first year as an illustrator. Wood flew into a tirade and quit, vowing never to work for Mad Magazine again. He went to Marvel, and Stan Lee put him on a struggling title called DareDevil. At the time, Marvel paid $20 a page, but since Wood was the leading artist in the industry, they gave him $45 a page for pencils and another $15 for inks. Wood had a hard time working in the Marvel method. The Marvel method started with the writer describing a story to the artist, and then the artist would draw the story to fit the page count. And to finish it, the writer or the editor, or sometimes even a secretary, would write the dialogue balloons and narration boxes to fit the art. Wood hated this style of production. Wood grew to resent Stan Lee because he felt that Lee took too much credit for writing when the artist was drawing out the plot. After some arguing, Lee let Wood have more input on Daredevil and gave him writing credit. It was Wood who created Daredevil's all-red outfit and the Double D chest logo. Wood was also the first artist to draw Daredevil's radar sense. Stan Lee had invented the Marvel method, and Wood was going to use it against him. Wood decided to not let the dialogue and narration process be easy for Lee. Wood began drawing panel sequences that did not fit together. During his time at Marvel, Wood pushed all of Lee's buttons, and they sniped at each other for the next 3 years. Then suddenly, Wood quit. Stan Lee and the staffers at Marvel were shocked with Wood's departure, but not sorry. They had been dealing with Wood's increasing mood swings and drinking. Wood's departure happened at the bequest of former MLJ editor Harry Shorten. Shorten offered Wood the senior editor position at a new comic book line he was creating. The creation of Tower Publishing and Tower Comics had come about as a way for Shorten to legitimize his Midwood publishing operation. Midwood published seedy sex novels for men. These novels told the stories of scandalous stewardesses, bad boys with nice girls, rich women and the poor men they toyed with, and so on. The line had started with Shorten and a few of his buddies sitting around an office cranking out novel after novel after novel, and in no time they were rolling in loot. Although they were commercially successful, they weren't considered legit by the general publishing world because of the nature of their books. Shorten came up with a plan to gain respectability. He created a new company called Tower Publishing and moved the operation into a traditional office building. He still published under the Midwood name, but to the general public, these were the offices of Tower Publishing. The next part of the plan was to publish science fiction, western, and romance paperback novels under the Tower Publishing imprint. This would add to the appearance of being a respectable publisher, regardless of how well these books sold. Tower needed illustration work, and Shorten and Wood became acquainted with each other. Shorten had created many of the MLJ superheroes in the 1940s, and as a publisher he was very aware of how well Marvel Comics was doing, and he thought the time was right for him to get back into comics. He pitched the idea to Wood, who then agreed to become the editor of the Tower Comics line. First thing Wood did was contact his friend Len Brown. Brown was a product developer for the Topps Chewing Gum Company. You know, the company that makes baseball cards? A few years before, Brown had recruited Wood to work with him on the creation of the Mars Attacks card line, and during this project, the two became close friends. They often discussed comic books, superheroes, and secret agent programs. Both men loved the James Bond films and TV shows like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and the British spy show The Avengers. During the production of Mars Attacks, the two talked about doing a secret agent superhero mashup, but neither moved on the idea. That all changed with the start of Tower Comics. Wood asked Brown to write a 12-page story. Wood would illustrate it and then pitch it to Shorten. Brown wrote a story about a superhero called Captain Thunderbolt, and with his crew of Thunder agents, he thwarted the evil plans of a villain named Dynamo. Before showing it to Shorten, Wood made a slight change or two to the story. First, he renamed the hero with the villain's name, Dynamo. Second, as a joke, he renamed Dynamo's alter ego, Len Brown, after his friend. Shorten saw it, liked it, and gave it the go-ahead before Brown knew about it or had a chance to protest. Next, Wood and Brown sat down and assembled the rest of the Thunder Agents team. They decided that each superhero should have a unique power, but they should also have limitations and liabilities to that power. Thunder Agent Dynamo was the team leader. His powers came from his Thunder Belt. Unfortunately for him, his Thunder Belt had a time limit. When the belt wasn't charged, Dynamo was just a regular guy. There was also a speedster called Lightning. His powers sped up his metabolism, which in turn was aging him, in fact, killing him. Mentor used mental telepathy powers, which he gained by wearing a special helmet. Like Dynamo, without the helmet, he was just a regular guy. Perhaps the most innovative character of the group was the artificial multi-bodied android No Man. No Man would put himself in the harm's way. His body would be destroyed, but his conscience would transfer to a new body. The new body was located at the Thunder Agent's base, which wasn't all that convenient if other members of the team needed him. These powered heroes were backed up by a non-superpowered assault team. Together, the Thunder Agents would go on to save the world from the likes of Iron Maiden, Red Star, and the Warlord. In 1967, Marvel was expecting to sweep the Alley Awards, but the Thunder Agents got in the way. Wally Wood won Best Pencil Artist, and the Thunder Agents won awards for Best Giant Comic and Best New Book. After these wins, Tower Comics expanded. Dynamo and No Man got their own titles, and new characters like the Raven and Undersea Agent joined the team. From the start, this endeavor was too big for Wood to do by himself, so he brought in friends from around the industry to help. Wood ran Tower Comics production from his home studio. His wife Tatjana was an artist working at DC Comics, and he commissioned her to color and ink the Thunder Agent covers. In addition to this, she helped with inks and lettering on the interior pages. Working from his home studio, Wood was accessible to many young newcomers who wanted to break into comics. Future Charlton editor Nick Cuddy and G.I. Joe legend Larry Hama both found work assisting Wood. It was pretty much a 24-hour-a-day operation at the Wood studio. Wood was a workaholic, and his only breaks came from eating and sleeping. The studio was crammed with drawing tables, and Wood's friends would sit there all day and night working on stories. Well, there was one exception to this. Wally and Tatjana were folk and country music fans, and every now and then they would clear out the studio, invite all their friends over, and have a good old folk music hootenanny. Wood would play guitar and sing. Like his artwork, he possessed a level of skill which left people in amazement. Drawing comics and playing music sounds like the idealistic life. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite like that. Wood's unexplained headaches continued to get worse. Sometimes a migraine could last for days. He went to doctors and underwent all sorts of tests, but the doctors found nothing. He spiraled into depression and almost manic mood swings. Wood continued going to the bottle for relief, and he became an alcoholic. Wood's marriage to Tatjana and Tower Comics both came to an end in 1969. Tower Comics was the victim of distribution problems. The Wood marriage couldn't stand up against Wally's ever-increasing health and emotional issues. Wood followed these setbacks by self-printing a one-shot comic called Heroes, Inc. He also produced an adult strip called Sally Forth. This was for the military magazine Overseas Weekly. Both were sold in military PXs and not available to the general public. As the 1960s came to an end, Wood found freelance work at DC Comics. He worked with future Marvel editor-in-chief Jim Shooter on Captain Action. He did covers for Plop. He did inks for DC titles like Stalker and Sandman, often inking the artwork of longtime friends Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby. The highlight of Wood's DC work in the mid-1970s was on All-Star Comics, where he co-created Power Girl. While he was working on this title, Wood was also working on adult erotic underground comics. This was also the time period after the sexual revolution and before the AIDS epidemic. And during this time period, American society had a very liberal view towards sex and sexuality. Wood gave Power Girl a very sexualized look in costume and body that really reflected the attitude of the swinging 70s. As time went on, Wood began to withdraw from the comic scene. He married for a third time in 1978, and that year, Wood and his new bride Muriel recorded a folk music album called Wally Wood Sings. Wood's alcoholism and health conditions continued to get worse, and new problems began to materialize. Due to his years of heavy cigarette smoking, Wood began having breathing problems and lung issues. Wood discovered around the same time that he could make some money attending comic book conventions. While attending the San Diego Comic-Con, he decided that he needed to change his surroundings. He thought moving to California would be good for him. He told people that he was still in contact with that he could not survive another bitter northeastern winter. Wally and Muriel moved to California, but his demons and health issues followed them. Muriel divorced him, and Wood suffered a series of strokes that left him blind in one eye. He couldn't travel to comic shows to make a living. He struggled to pick up a pencil. His speech was slurred. He could no longer draw or sing. And in 1981, he just couldn't take it anymore. Wally Wood was the first hero to the first generation of comic book fanboys. Who knows how comic fandom would have developed without him? He took the medium of comic book storytelling to a much higher level than was before him. He became the inspiration for the next generation of comic book storytellers. And to this day, Wally Wood's 22 panels that work is still being learned by new artists, writers, and editors. Like all great artists, Wally Wood was mortal. But his artwork is eternal, and his impact on the medium of comic books will live on forever. Hi everyone, FizzFop here, and I just wanted to say thank you for watching. I know this was a really long video. This was perhaps my longest video I've done for YouTube. And thanks again for bearing with it. And there's a couple of times where I think it goes a little slow. But unfortunately, I didn't know what to cut out, what to leave in, and I really struggled with this. Anyway, Wally Wood really is a tragic figure. I can speculate as to what he may have been going through. Nowadays, I think we take modern medicine for granted in many cases. We know about things like being bipolar and what food allergies can do to people. Back then, they didn't have a clue about this, and I've sort of seen this up close and personal in my own life. I used to have a former coworker who used to suffer from horrible migraine headaches. These headaches would hit him, and he would get dizzy. You'd have to sit down. There was a couple of times he just looked like he was almost on the verge of tears. And he went to doctors. They couldn't figure anything out. And then finally, a doctor said, well, maybe you're allergic to citrus. Turns out that's what it was. He was allergic to citrus. I never even heard of that before, but that turned out to be the case, and 2 or 3 days after he stopped eating oranges and drinking orange juice every morning, the headaches went away. Who knew? I didn't. Again, thanks for watching. Please help me and support my computer fund. I think we're up to like $104 right now. Woo! And the links are in the description box. And please don't forget to hit the like button, and until next time, take it easy, and I'll see you around. Bye.